My husband Robert died on a Thursday morning in March. He had kept every letter I ever wrote him, every birthday card from our children, every drawing our grandchildren had made for him, 31 years of drawings, starting from wobbly crayon suns and progressing to actual portraits that he had framed and hung in his study. He kept them all. He kept the watch his father gave him the day he turned 18. He kept the first photograph ever taken of us together, a blurry, badly lit picture from a party in 1979 where we are both laughing at something outside the frame and we look so young I sometimes can't believe it is real. He kept a small wooden box that had belonged to his mother. Inside it was nothing valuable by any measure that the world would recognize: a pressed flower, a button, a folded piece of paper with a recipe in his mother's handwriting. He opened that box once a year, on her birthday, and sat quietly with it for a few minutes. 3 weeks after Robert died, I had a small cardiac episode and was admitted to hospital. While I was in that hospital bed, my daughter-in-law Melissa went into my home. She took Robert's belongings, every one of them, and she threw them away. And she filmed herself doing it. On a live stream. Laughing. My name is Joan. I am 72 years old. And what happened after that live stream was seen by the wrong people is something Melissa did not plan for. Not even close. I need you to understand who Robert was before I tell you what she did to his memory. Robert Calloway was a builder. Not a developer, not a contractor in any grand sense. He built things with his hands, with his crew, with 40 years of skill and physical knowledge that lived in his body as much as his mind. He built houses. He built extensions and conversions and once, memorably, a small church hall for a community in our town that couldn't afford to pay his full rate, so he charged them half and donated the other half himself without telling anyone. I found out about the church hall from the vicar, 3 months after Robert did it, who stopped me in the street to tell me my husband was the finest man he had ever met. That was Robert. Quiet goodness. The kind that doesn't announce itself. We had 2 sons, Matthew and Daniel. Matthew was like his father, steady, physical, someone who showed love through action rather than words. Daniel was different, brighter in a surface way, more charming, more drawn to the idea of status and comfort than either Robert or I had ever cared about. Daniel married Melissa 6 years ago. She was 32, worked in social media marketing, and had an online following of about 40,000 people to whom she documented her daily life in considerable detail. I had nothing against this. People live differently, I understand that. But I noticed from the beginning that Melissa had a particular way of describing her life that required everything around her to serve as a backdrop. Robert's house, our house, was, in Melissa's estimation, dated. Robert's things were clutter. Robert himself, who she treated with surface warmth and private contempt, was very sweet but honestly a bit much. I heard her say that last phrase once, on the phone, not knowing I was in the next room. I said nothing. I was good at saying nothing in those years. Robert died of a stroke on a Thursday morning. Quickly. Without warning. He had been eating breakfast, toast and marmalade, same as every morning for 50 years, and then he was gone. The grief of it was the kind that doesn't have edges. It was everywhere. It was in the toast and the marmalade. It was in the study with the drawings. It was in the small wooden box on the shelf. 3 weeks later, my heart decided it had taken enough for now. The cardiac episode was not severe, the doctors reassured me multiple times, but it required monitoring. I was admitted for 3 days. I left my house for 3 days. That was all Melissa needed. I found out from my granddaughter. Sophie is 17. She is Daniel's daughter from a brief relationship before Melissa, a girl I have loved with my whole heart since she was placed in my arms at 2 days old, and who has, despite everything, loved me back with equal completeness. Sophie followed Melissa on social media. Not because she wanted to, she told me later she found Melissa exhausting, but because Daniel had asked her to keep the peace. Sophie was sitting in her school common room when the Livestream notification appeared on her phone. Melissa had titled it, "Major Clear Out, Helping Mum Joan Get Organized." Sophie clicked it. What she saw was Melissa standing in Robert's study, my Robert's study, with his drawings on the walls and his tools on the shelf and his books arranged exactly as he had left them, holding his watch. Melissa was holding Robert's father's watch, the one he had kept for 54 years, turning it over in her hand. She said to her camera, "Okay, so this is giving very much charity shop situation. Like who actually keeps a watch this old? This is going in the donation box." She dropped it in a box. Then she moved to the shelves. One by one she picked up Robert's things, his books, his small wooden box, the framed photographs, the grandchildren's drawings, and described each one to her audience with the particular casual cruelty of someone who has never been asked to account for their words. The drawings, 31 years of them, starting from Sophie's own wobbly crayon son drawn at age 3, she described as honestly just hoarding. "No offense, but this is not a gallery." She put them in a black bin bag. Then she found the blurry photograph from 1979. The one where Robert and I are laughing at something outside the frame. She held it up to the camera. She said, "Okay, this is actually kind of cute in a vintage way, but also where does it end, you know?" She laughed. She put it in the bin bag. Sophie watched all of this on her phone in her school common room. She told me later she sat completely still for about 30 seconds. Then she stood up, walked to the corridor, and called me. I was in a hospital bed. I answered. Sophie said, "Nan, I need you to stay calm. But Melissa is in your house and she is throwing away Granddad's things on a live stream." I said, "Is she still live?" Sophie said, "Yes." I said, "Screenshot everything. Every single thing. Don't stop." Sophie said, "Already am, Nan. That girl. 17 years old. Steady as her grandfather." What Melissa had not accounted for was her own audience. 40,000 followers. Not a huge number by social media standards, but large enough to contain a significant sample of human decency. And as Melissa cheerfully dismantled a dead man's study, her comments section erupted. At first it was confusion. Then questions. Then, as people began to understand what they were watching, a daughter-in-law, 3 weeks after her husband's father had died, in the grieving widow's house, on a live stream, throwing away 50 years of a man's life and calling it clutter, the comments turned. The live stream had 400 viewers when it started. By the time Melissa noticed the comment section, it had 9,000. The comments were not kind. Melissa ended the stream abruptly. But the internet, as Melissa should have known better than anyone, does not forget. Within 2 hours, clips had been shared across multiple platforms. A woman who ran a grief support page, a woman named Carol with over 200,000 followers, shared the clip with a caption that simply said, "This woman's husband died 3 weeks ago. This is what is happening in her home while she is in hospital." Carol's post reached 4 million people by the next morning. A journalist from a national newspaper called Daniel's workplace. 2 of Melissa's brand sponsorships, a home organization company and a lifestyle brand, terminated their contracts within 48 hours. And a solicitor named Howard, who had watched the clip on his daughter's phone over dinner, called the number of a law firm colleague who specialized in property and estate law, and asked a question. The question was, if a person enters a property without the owner's consent and removes or damages items of sentimental or financial value, what are the legal options? The answer was considerable. I discharged myself from hospital one day early. The doctors were not pleased. I told them I was going home and I would rest there, and if they had serious objections they could call my GP and we could all discuss it. They let me go. Matthew, my steady, quiet, Robert-shaped son, drove me home. He had seen the livestream. He had seen Carol's post. He had not spoken to Daniel yet because he did not trust himself to speak to Daniel yet. He held my arm as I walked into my house. The study door was open. I stood in the doorway. The shelves were half empty. The walls had rectangular patches where the drawings had hung, pale squares against the slightly darker paint, the ghost shapes of 31 years of grandchildren's art. Robert's desk was cleared. His wooden box was gone. His watch was gone. The photograph from 1979 was gone. I stood in that doorway for a long time. Matthew stood behind me with his hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. Then I turned around. I went to the kitchen. I sat at the table. I called Sophie and asked her to send me every screenshot. Then I called Howard. Howard was thorough and very calm in the way that good solicitors are calm, not because they don't care, but because they have converted caring into precision. He explained that Melissa had entered my property without my knowledge or consent. That she had removed items that were legally mine, not Daniel's, not marital property, mine, including items of demonstrable sentimental value that a court would recognize. That she had done this while I was medically incapacitated and therefore unable to object. He explained that the livestream constituted documentation of the act, created by Melissa herself, time-stamped and publicly accessible. He said, "Mrs. Calloway, she filmed it herself." I have rarely seen a case so thoroughly documented by the defendant. A formal letter was sent to Daniel and Melissa within 48 hours. It requested the immediate return of all removed items, a full written inventory of everything taken, and compensation for any items that could not be returned. It also noted that a complaint had been filed with the police regarding unlawful entry and theft. Daniel called me when the letter arrived. His voice was shaking, not with anger but with something that might have been the beginning of understanding what he had allowed. I said, "Daniel, did you know she was going to do this?" A long silence. He said, "No. I swear to you, Mum. I didn't know." I said, "Then what you need to decide now is what you are going to do about it." Another silence. "Then, I'm going to help you get it all back. Everything. I don't care what it takes." It took 3 weeks. Melissa had not thrown everything away. Some items had gone to a charity shop, some to a storage unit she rented, some were still in her car. Daniel tracked every item personally. He visited the charity shop and bought back Robert's watch for £60, £60 for 54 years of family history. The photograph from 1979 was found in the storage unit, slightly bent at one corner. Matthew carefully flattened it and reframed it himself. The wooden box came back intact. The recipe in his mother's handwriting was still inside. The grandchildren's drawings, 12 of them were recovered. 19 were gone. I held the 12 recovered drawings for a very long time. Then I called Sophie and asked her if she remembered drawing the wobbly crayon sun. She said she didn't remember it but she'd always been told it was her best work. I laughed. For the first time in weeks. Properly. Melissa and Daniel separated 4 months later. I did not cause this. I did not celebrate it. A marriage ending is never something to celebrate, whatever the circumstances. Daniel moved into a flat closer to me. He comes for dinner every Sunday. He sits in Robert's study sometimes, quietly, the way Robert used to, and I think he is doing the slow, necessary work of understanding the difference between the man his father was and the choices he himself had been making. I believe he will get there. He has his father's capacity for quiet goodness somewhere inside him. It just got buried for a while under the wrong influences. Sophie turned 18 last month. I gave her the recovered photograph, the blurry one from 1979 where Robert and I are laughing. I had a second copy made for myself first. She cried when I gave it to her. She held it with both hands and looked at it for a long time and said, "You both look so happy." "We were," I said. "For 44 years, we were." Robert's study is full again. The 12 recovered drawings are back on the walls. Matthew drew 4 new ones himself. He is not, it must be said, a natural artist, but he tried very hard and they made me laugh, and they are now framed alongside the originals. The wooden box sits on the shelf. I open it on her birthday, the way Robert did. I sit quietly for a few minutes. I read the recipe in his mother's handwriting. I feel him in the room when I do it. I always will. I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who has ever treated an elderly person's belongings as clutter. I want to say it plainly and without anger, because I have spent enough energy on anger already, and it is not a fuel I intend to keep burning. Those belongings are not clutter. They are the physical record of a human life. They are the proof that someone existed, that they loved, that they were loved, that they built something and kept something and carried something through all the years that you did not know them. The watch is not a watch. It is 54 years of a father's love passed to a son. The drawings are not drawings. They are the record of every grandchild who sat at a kitchen table and made something for the person they loved most. The photograph is not a photograph. It is the exact moment two people who would spend 44 years together were laughing at something neither of them can remember anymore. Before you throw something away, ask whose hands have held it. Ask what it meant to the person who kept it all these years. Ask. Always ask. Robert was a quiet man who built things with his hands and donated half his rate to a church hall and kept 31 years of his grandchildren's drawings on his wall. He deserved better than a bin bag on a livestream. They all do. If Joan and Robert's story moved you, please give this video a like and subscribe. We share powerful stories every single week. Share this today, this one needs to be seen. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Joan's position? What would you have said to Daniel? I am reading every single comment and I want to hear everything you feel.